lot of information. This is going to be a lot of information today, so we want to make sure and give time to present it all, and also to be able to have an opportunity for people to ask questions and get as much as we can. So we're really excited about this kickoff. For you that I don't know, my name is David Knight. I'm the Executive Director for CalCAPA, which is the California Community Action Partnership Association. So I've had the wonderful opportunity of leading a bunch of wonderful staff and also being the representation of our 60 member agencies across California. Today is a really special day with this training. It is an opportunity for us to partner together with CalCAPA and also CSD to present the organizational standards and kind of kick off. We know that all our agencies are in the middle of collecting. Well, let me say it again. It's an ongoing process, always collecting the standards, but we're in the process of reporting those out. So you didn't really come to hear me speak though. So the first speaker is a good friend of mine, Mary Beth. And Mary Beth, I'm just really excited to have on this call. She has a wealth of knowledge. She got her start in Kentucky, and she was working in Kentucky at an agency and started at a community action agency. And from there, we kind of trained at the same time together throughout the network and kind of grew up, if you will, in the network together. So I'm always really delighted to see one of the brightest and smartest people in this community action network to give of her time to us. After being at the agency, she did work for the state of Kentucky and oversaw the CSBG program along with a lot of other things. And then from there, if I remember correctly, went straight to NASCAP. For you that don't know, NASCAP is our national association for our state departments. And so she was able to help lead in a lot of development of states all across this country and helping with organizational standards and helping with reporting, with helping in all the elements of being a strong CSBG state and strong CSBG agencies. And so now her newest role is with the national partnership. And so she's continued to give to this network, and it's just a great friend of mine and a mentor and a wonderful person. So I'm really happy to have her come to present to our state. After Mary Beth is finished, then from there, the state will also come on. I believe Wilmer and his team are going to come on and deliver some very specific stuff. So we're really excited to have that. So we'll introduce them at that time. So without further ado, Mary Beth, you want to take it away?
Thanks so much, David. Oh my goodness, no pressure following an introduction like that. Want to say thank you, David. Thank you, CalCAPA, for inviting the partnership to join your amazing network to talk a little bit about organizational standards. So today's session, I just kind of want to set the bar and set the stage here. Today's session is kind of the 101. This is the basics. This is orienting you to what the standards are, where they came from, and some tools that we have at the national partnership level to help you as you're assessing whether or not you are meeting the organizational standards. So, and then as David said, from there, your state office will be here to help give you some state-specific information, which is a great pairing. Really appreciate the thought that went into this session and the development by CalCAPA, so thank you. Want to take a moment, though, for us to first ground ourselves in the promise of community action. So the promise of community action says that community action changes people's lives, embodies a spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. And, you know, I think that when we're starting on, especially in this work that may seem a little bit more administrative in nature, I want to remind you that all of the work that we do, this important compliance work, is ultimately so that we can better live our mission and fulfill our promise. Also want to take a moment to acknowledge that every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who have contributed their hopes, their dreams, and their energy to making the history that led to this moment. We recognize that some were brought here against their will, and some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hopes of a better life, and some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. And so today I want to acknowledge that I'm joining you from Louisville, Kentucky, and this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Osage people. And I pay my respects to the elders, both past and present, who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. Invite you to also include your own land acknowledgement, if you would like, in the chat as well. So again, we've kind of framed this up already, what we're doing here today. I would love to have a sense of who's in the room, and I think I'm I'm seeing some names scroll past very quickly. It's good to see everybody, my goodness. And then we want to do an overview of the organizational standards and what they are, talk about how you can assess yourself against the standards, talk about those partnership resources, and then save some time for questions and answers. As we go today, guys, I encourage you, if you have a thought or a question, please put it in the chat. I'll try to be responsive as we go, okay? So with that, I would love to get a sense of who is in the room, and I think I saw that you all have reactions because I saw a couple of thumbs up earlier. So wonder if there's any frontline staff or frontline heroes in the room, could you give me a thumbs up in your reactions in Zoom? Do you see your thumbs up option? Okay, I see one. Okay, that's great. How about, oh, two, great. Program or department managers. Okay, I see a few more of those. All right, thank you, our managers in the network. How about our CEOs or executive directors? Do we have CEOs, executive directors on the call today? All right, we're about equal numbers for department managers and CEOs. Do we have any board members on the line today? I think that might be one. And I'll just flag that tomorrow we're going to talk about board members in relation to the organizational standards. So hopefully we'll see them tomorrow. I'm not sure that we have any customers on the line today for a session like this. How about any Roma professionals? That might be a Roma trainer, a Roma implementer. David is a master Roma trainer, so he can give 2 thumbs up. He gets to double click that. All right. And how about my CCAPs? Do I have CCAPs in the room with us today? Okay, a couple. Well, here's the good news, guys, is CCAP will be enrolling for its next cohort starting next year, starting in the fall. So if you haven't checked out CCAP lately, I encourage you to do so. Thanks so much. It's very helpful for me to kind of have a sense of who our audience is and to frame our conversation. So before we dive into the organizational standards themselves, want to start with our national theory of change. And so if you are unfamiliar with the theory of change, what a theory of change does is it kind of quickly articulates the change that an organization like ours would like to see, and articulates the underlying principles or assumptions that lead you to select the services that you select to get to your goals, okay? And so at a national level, we created a national theory of change for the nation's 1,000 community action agencies to try and capture the magic of community action. And so this national theory of change, the way I like to read this, guys, is I start at the top, that collectively, all of us together, what we try to do as a community action network is one of our goals is that individuals and families with low incomes are stable and achieve economic security, that communities where people with low incomes live are healthy and offer economic opportunity, and that people with low incomes are engaged and active in building opportunities in communities. Hopefully you see those 3 big goals and you recognize that your community action agency is working in at least one of them, right? Maybe you see yourself in at least one of those. And for us to achieve those goals, we are built on a strong foundation of over 1,000 local high-performing community action agencies, state associations, state offices, and federal partners who all receive CSBG, which is part of what makes you a community action agency. And we are mobilizing communities to fight poverty. And then you kind of move into the middle section here, and we have some core principles that, again, articulate some of what we believe, right? So we believe that poverty is complex. We believe in building local solutions. We believe that we have to support family stability to have a foundation for economic security. We don't just provide services, we advocate for systems change because systems often keep the people we serve in conditions of poverty. We seek to pursue positive individual, family, and community level change, and we want to maximize the involvement of the people we serve, people with low incomes in their communities. We want to engage our local community partners, and then do all of this by leveraging state, federal, and community resources. We don't just use CSBG, we use all kinds of funding to get to those big goals. And then we have this performance management piece, which I'm going to dive into in just a second, but essentially these principles all that inform the services and strategies that we use to get to these big goals. So this quickly articulates the things that are very important to us as a community action network. And it is no mistake, guys, that one of the pillars or one of those building blocks in that graphic was this section about performance management, because we cannot do this work. We cannot provide high quality services and create those big community level change and support families to create change for themselves if we don't operate efficiently, right? Efficiently is what I'm trying to say, excuse me. And so within our framework, we kind of have two sides of a coin. We look at how well did the network operate and what difference did the network make? So we are not just, again, we're not just service providers that don't evaluate how we're doing. We want to be highly accountable for those goals that we're putting forward, and highly accountable to our federal funders too. And so on the how well did the network operate side of this coin, we have a couple of ways that we measure or ensure that we are performing well. One of them is organizational standards, which we're going to talk a lot about today. Also, do want to flag that local community action agencies are not the only ones with standards. CSBG is pretty unique in that in this performance management framework, we also created standards for state administrators, how the state performs. Those are the state performance measures, and as well as federal accountability measures. We have some measures and expectations of our federal funders and how they interact with us and how they engage with us. And then also under the how well did the network operate is ROMA, results-oriented management and accountability. It is our business management system that assures that we are constantly evaluating the work that we're doing and seeking opportunities to incrementally improve over time. On the other side of this coin is where we look at what difference did we make? How much change did we create? Did we achieve those big lofty goals that we just talked about? And we measure those by our national performance indicators, which are reported in your CSBG annual report. But this organizational standards piece is really important and where we're going to focus today. And so if you are unfamiliar, the organizational standards were developed over a period of what felt like a million years, but it was a few years, with really significant input from the network. These were not dreamed up by some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. There was a really robust opportunity for folks at all levels of the network to put forward what they thought the characteristics were of a healthy organization. And the way that I think of the org standards is that they are indicators of an agency who has the capacity that is necessary to be considered one of us, to be part of our community action family. I was just on a call earlier today with an agency who said to me, it's really important to me not just that my agency is strong, but that all of my agencies are strong in the state, that my fellow agencies are strong, because a weakness for one of us is a weakness for all of us. And so the organizational standards really assure that every community has a community action agency that has the capacity to meet their needs and be a healthy organization. Now, these indicators that we have identified in the organizational standards have some really direct links to things like the CSBG Act, which is our federal law that outlines CSBG. There's some direct links to OMB guidance or uniform guidance, which has some standards for how agencies who administer federal funds are to operate in the way that they use those federal funds and have oversight of those federal funds. There are also some direct links to other federal laws and regulations, particularly around HR and things like that. Also, though, it's not just laws, it's also about good management practice, right? We've been around since 1964. We know what good leadership and good management should look like. And so there are some links between the organizational standards and those best practices. And then also we have baked in our values, the values of community action. You can really thread the needle and see where from the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964, you can see some of those same concepts appear within the organizational standards themselves. So I want to frame up, it's not just about compliance. These are about best practices or practices that are really essential for us to be able to live into that promise of community action. So the organizational standards were established in CSBG IM 138. And IM is an information memoranda that OCS, our federal funder, the Office of Community Services, puts forward. Now, kind of a fun nuance for everybody. If you go to the CSBG Act itself right now and you said, show me where it says I have to do organizational standards, you're not going to find it there because the CSBG Act hasn't been reauthorized since 1998. And so OCS had to put the standards into place by issuing an IM, and then this did get incorporated into an Appropriations Act, which essentially made these into law. But if you go to the Act itself, you're not going to find the standards. But this IM, if you have never read it, really recommend that you do, because it doesn't just list out the standards, it also details some of the thinking behind the standards and some of the approach behind the standards. So for instance, when you read that IM, one of the things you're going to see is that OCS does not assess the standards. That is up to the state offices to assess the standards. And now, just to clarify, the reason for that is that because Community Services Block Grant is a block grant. The feds in that case essentially have some overarching guidance, but they really leave day-to-day administration up to the states. Essentially, every state gets a block of funding that they put their own rules and regulations around, and then they are responsible for the day-to-day administration within that state. So if you read the IM, you'll see that OCS recognizes that it is up to state offices, in your case CSD, to assess whether or not your agency is meeting those standards. It does say that the state has to do that annually too. Your state isn't picking on you when they're asking for this information annually. It is a federal requirement. So when you look at the organizational standards themselves, you're going to see that they are organized into 3 thematic groups: maximum feasible participation, vision and direction, and operations and accountability. So going back to what I just said about, you could really thread the needle from 1964 to what you see today. Maximum feasible participation is one of those areas where you see our principles and our values live. This is where we're looking at ensuring that the people that we serve are included in the administration of the agency, that we gather their input, that we involve them in decision making, that we include the community in the work that we do, and that we do really thorough community needs assessments to inform the work that we do, because poverty is not the same across the country. It's not the same across California, right? Everybody has a little bit of a different need, and that's what a community needs assessment will do for you, is assure that you are identifying those really unique conditions that need to be addressed by your agency. Vision and direction really gets more into the big picture, good management kind of leadership stuff, to use the technical term. This is where you have standards around organizational leadership, around board governance, and specifically around strategic planning. And then operations and accountability, this is kind of where you get more into some of like the legal framework. Some of it is good management practice, but also a lot of legal framework. So HR, right? We can't do this work unless we've got awesome staff, and to have awesome staff, we have to have awesome processes that support them. Your financial operations and oversight, and how you use and analyze data. So to give you a little bit more of a flavor of the organizational standards, that there was, remember I said there was a multi-year process where we gathered input from the Community Action Network. Yeah, that process started in 2012 when the Center of Excellence was established here at the National Community Action Partnership. And over a period of multiple years, we got that feedback before we ultimately wound up implementing organizational standards in 2016 that have those 3 thematic groups, those 9 categories we just talked about. And then within those 9 categories, there are a total of 58 individual standards that your agency has to meet if you're a private community action agency. If you are a public community action agency, there are some standards that simply just do not apply to you because of the nature of your governance. So you have 50 organizational standards. You have nothing additional beyond the 58. Some of the standards might be adapted a little bit given your unique context and the way that you operate. So for all my folks who are on the line who are from a public community action agency, just want to caution you to be very familiar with what is required of you. And when you're looking at guidance, ensure that you're looking at guidance that applies to a public community action agency. And I'll flag, I came from a public community action agency, and I can remember in the early days going, wait a minute, does this apply to me? Does this not apply to me? And I'll show you some resources to help you get to the bottom of that. So a little bit more about the standards themselves. So as I said, they were developed by the network, for the network. We included the input of our CSBG working group, which is made up of community action agencies, state CSBG offices, and state associations to help inform the development of the standards, as well as the development of tools and resources that agencies like you implement them. Guys, I am getting some feedback, so folks, just be sure that you are on mute. Okay? That would be very helpful. Okay. Oh, and by the way, the CSBG working group still meets today. We still come together and talk about org standards today. Actually, during COVID, there were some meetings of the CSBG working group to talk about how do we navigate the standards in this time? What do agencies need to be able to meet the standards right now? So we talked about that the standards don't live alone. They're not like the only piece of performance management. They're part of a broader performance management framework that assures that we are accountable at state, local, and federal levels. So when you get into reading the standards, one of the things you're going to find is that they're pretty broad. They're not very prescriptive about how you have to do something, generally speaking. And that was really intentional in the design because, you've heard that saying, if you've seen one community action agency, you've seen one community action agency. And so we tried to keep them, or the network tried to keep them broad enough to recognize the need for each community action agency to be able to be responsive to local needs. Here's the other thing, is that because your state office is the one who will assess compliance with the organizational standards, there needs to be some room for states to apply their own lens and understanding of what those standards mean within your own state. And so this is probably another flag that I should give you, is that as we're going through, whenever you're looking at organizational standards, you have to ask, how does this work in my state? And if you are unsure, if you don't have, if you are unclear about how your state interprets a particular standard and its meaning, you need to reach out to your state office. I believe we have some regional reps on the call today who will also help point you towards some California specific resources to help you make that determination of if you're meeting a standard or not meeting a standard. As I said, states have to do this assessment on an annual basis. And kind of following up on the previous point, there is not really, at the national level, there's not a specific required documentation or processes that are dictated within the standards themselves, because again, that is up to your state office to provide that guidance. Also, one of the other things about the organizational standards that can be a little, I don't know, I don't want to say uncomfortable, but it's the word I'm going to go with. CSBG organizational standards look to ensure that you have an item, that you are performing a certain practice, but they generally are not looking at the quality of that practice. So we're looking to see that, you know, your board is structured according to the CSBG Act. We're looking to see that you are gathering data in your community needs assessment. We're looking to see that you're doing a risk assessment. But the organizational standards are not looking at how well are you doing your risk assessment or how well is your board performing. Now, those are determinations that at the local level, you guys should be doing. You guys should be assessing, how are we doing? Are we really living into the practice that the standards are articulating, right? But in the organizational standards themselves, we're looking to see that you have the practice in place. That is really what the organizational standards are looking for. So today, we're not going to go through each of the standards one by one. Like I said, there's 58 of them. That would be terribly painful for all of us if I read all of the standards to you. So instead, what we're going to do today is we're going to go through the categories, and I'll introduce you to what you can expect to see in those categories. Then we're going to talk about some of the tools to help you look at the standards yourself. Also, I should mention at this point too that this session is one of a series that we're going to have about organizational standards. So we're going to do some of that more deep dive nitty gritty work in some of the follow-up sessions. So tomorrow we're going to talk about boards. We're going to have a session specifically for public community action agencies to talk about some of those nuances. And the others are escaping my mind at the moment, but we have a slide about it in just a little bit. So we'll cover all of that. So to introduce you to category 1, this is consumer input and involvement. This category is based largely, really largely on our values, and is supported by the CSBG Act, that the people and communities we serve really know best about what they need, right? And that we should work in partnership with them to address the needs they identify and ensure that we have their leadership and their voice at the table as we design strategies. I want to take you back to, you know, thinking about that theory of change, you know, that foundation where we said we have 1,000 local agencies. It didn't say who provides services. It said to mobilize communities to fight poverty, right? We are the kindling, if you will, to inspire action at the local level. We are more than service providers in this work, and we have to have the voices of the people we serve in our work to be effective. Category 2 is all about community engagement, and that, you know, we see that community action is really the backbone organization of community efforts. Back to that point I just made a minute ago. We don't do this work alone. We lift up the community with us. We empower the community to really create solutions to address the causes and conditions of poverty at the local level. And then we've talked about community assessment. You know, this is such an important concept. You know, all the way back in 1964, one of the things that was recognized was, again, poverty is not the same across the country, and it's really important that folks at the local level have federal resources to address those unique causes and conditions of poverty. And so in order to address those unique causes and conditions of poverty, you have to know them. You have to know them really well. We have to be experts on our community needs in order to make effective programming. Also want to flag, though, sometimes when we talk about community assessment, we focus so much on needs and we forget it's not just about needs, it's about partners and other resources. You know, we want to assure that the federal funding that we're using is being used well, and that it is not duplicating other federal resources or local resources or state resources. We're not duplicating programs, that we're really coordinating all of these different sometimes siloed programs in a way, you know, pulling them all together to really holistically serve a community. I also just want to go on my soapbox for 1 minute. I once heard this saying that in relation to community assessment, that you cannot build on broken. And sometimes when we do community needs assessment, I think we engage with folks and we say, tell me everything that's broken and wrong in your community. And I think that we can, you know, when you really look at what a community assessment is meant to do, it's not just to talk about everything that's broken. It's also meant to talk about the beautiful things in your community where you have strengths. People want to engage in those things that are positive and have energy. And I think that talking to folks about what really works in your community and how can we strengthen it is one of the ways that you can garner some energy for your mission and for your work at the local level. Okay, off my soapbox, promise. So then category 4 is about organizational leadership. Effective organizations have to have strong organizational leadership, right? We may have seen it in our times where there's a great organization and then there's a big turnover in leadership, and that can really drag an organization down, right? We know how important leadership is. So this category is all about ensuring that we have the conditions and practices needed for effective leadership, which includes a mission that is focused on addressing poverty, and also a system for us to manage our performance and to continuously improve, also known as ROMA. Category 5, along that same lines, goes to board governance. So it's not just, you know, our CEOs and our managers and how we approach leadership in our agency. Our boards are essential to a strong operating organization, a strong functioning organization. Also want to flag, you know, one of the, you know, conditions for you to be considered a community action agency is that you have a tripartite board, and that tripartite board is made up of at least 1/3 of people with low incomes, 1/3 public officials, and the remainder of your board from the private sector or other interested partner organizations. And so this category will look to make sure that you have that structure. It will look to see that you are orienting and training and supporting your boards to be effective in their oversight role of the community action agency. So in category 6, it's all about strategic planning. This is about ensuring that your organization has a vision and that you have a good sense of where you're heading, that engages, you know, both the board and your staff in creating that future, that you understand how you're going to measure your success in getting there. And that, guys, it's agency-wide. You know, this is one of the things we hear about the organizational standards, and maybe something I should have mentioned at the top. Although it says CSBG organizational standards, the organizational standards apply to the entirety of your organization. It is not just, you know, the CSBG portion of your organization, but your entire organization. Now, disclaimer, asterisk, if you are a public community action agency, the organizational standards apply to whatever section of your organization that your advisory committee is over. So at my community action agency, initially my advisory board was over CSBG and LAHEAP. And so organizational standards apply to those sections of our organization. But while I was there, we actually expanded our board to provide oversight to the entirety of our department, which included our housing programs like HUD, included our senior meal services, included our senior volunteer program. So then the organizational standards apply to the entirety of our department. So that is something that you will want to be sure, public organizations, that you are clear about is where, you know, where are my lines where the organizational standards apply, because that is very important to be clear about. Human resource management, and I said this at the top, we cannot do this work without human resources, human assets, our coworkers, our staff, and you know, and in order for us to do this work, we have to manage our human assets effectively. So we need things like policies and procedures and support and training for staff to have an organization that is equipped with the capacity that we need to fight poverty and, again, live into the promise and the mission of community action. I don't think I need to explain that the financial operations and oversight are essential to a functioning organization. You know, what gets organizations into trouble faster than anything else is money. So this category looks to assure that you that your fiscal bottom line is not isolated from the mission, and that you have some high levels of financial accountability throughout your organization. And then data analysis. So I want to go back to, again, to the theory of change. We didn't just say, hey, we create change for people. We said, we create change for people, and it's also important to us to be accountable. And for us to be accountable, we have to have data and we have to use it. You know, we want to be sure that we are able to produce data that reflects the collective impact of our efforts to address poverty. And we also firmly believe in this message of no data without stories and no stories without data. You know, we love the idea of combining quantitative data, the numbers, along with the qualitative data. Because if I tell you 5 people got a job, you go, okay, great, that doesn't sound that impressive. And then you talk to those 5 people and about how that job maybe changed their lives, how it changed the trajectory of their lives, and all of a sudden that 5 is a whole lot more impressive. And it's important that we have both sides of that coin to effectively evaluate our organization's impact. So I want to give you a few tips for assessing the organizational standards as you are looking at them. First is that you should read the standards. You know, we just went through those 9 categories. There's 58 of them. Read them in context and as a whole. So what we mean by that is, you know, you're going to have some standards that appear standalone, but remember that there are a lot of links in the standards. So, for example, you don't just have to have a strategic plan. You have to have a strategic plan that's approved by your board. Your strategic plan needs to include data from your community needs assessment and your customer satisfaction results. So these items do link together. And so be cognizant of how these things link together and kind of the dependencies of one on the other to ensure that you are fully addressing all of the standard. We talked about that as you're looking at the standards themselves, if you have any questions about what does it take to meet the standard, always clarify that, with your state CSBG office. That is the correct phone call to make, is to your CSBG office. And we recommend not seeing the standards as something extra that you do or something external, but that you integrate them into your existing processes just so that it's easier. So, you know, in your community needs assessment process, ensure that whatever that process is in your organization, that it bakes in the requirements of the organizational standards and that you're collecting that information at the same time. So, you know, the organizational standards have some very specific requirements about the kind of data that you collect, for instance. So you want to be sure that, you know, your process calls for you to collect that data, because if you wait until you assess the organizational standards, you know, 6 months from now, it'll be too late, right? Your community needs assessment will be done and you can't go back. So make sure that you're integrating it into your existing processes. And as I said, it's really a good idea to have a standard process for collecting and documenting your compliance with the standards. So we, you know, that might be something as simple as we have a SharePoint or we have a shared file where, you know, it's numbered with each organizational standard, and whoever's in charge of that standard has to upload the documentation as it's done. Which leads me to another point. It is not a good idea to say the org standards are one person's job, because org standards are organization-wide, which means you probably need a team of people to help assure that you are on track. As someone who got tasked with, hey, make sure we meet the organizational standards, I'll tell you that was not the most efficient way to go about it. And you know, you can have someone who's in charge of making sure that everybody is doing what they need to do, and maybe keeping you on track with your assessments. But, you know, really it's, you know, the organization is a responsibility of all of us. And so, so are the organizational standards. We also recommend that, although you have to do this assessment for your state office every year, that, we talked about that the standards look to see that you have the process, but not how well it's done necessarily, or how much, you're not looking to, in that assessment, you're not looking for opportunities for improvement. You're really just looking to see, have I done what I said I would do? Am I compliant? We would recommend that you take it a step further, though, and do that hard work of really looking at your systems, your processes, the work that you're doing, and doing some deeper evaluation and identifying, hey, is there a way that we could run our board meetings better? Is there, maybe you take the category of customer engagement, right? And look to say, okay, how could we do this better beyond just what the organizational standards say? Also recommend that you benchmark your performance across all the standards over time, because you might find that if for several years you're having trouble meeting a few standards, that might tell you something about a potential cause or maybe a potential solution. It can also be helpful if you are kind of on a long journey to make some improvements in your organization. It's helpful to see, over time, when you're in the middle of change of a process improvement venture, man, it can feel like it is never ending. And it feels so good to be able to go to the data and take a step back and say, oh, look, maybe last year we were only at 90% of this standard spent. Now this year we're at 92. Like, we've improved, like our efforts are creating change. Also recommend that whatever process you use to document your standards, that you document that process. Because look, turnover is a thing, right? I mean, how many of you have had turnover in the last year, right? Probably everybody. So you want to ensure that your process is really clear and documented so that if there is turnover, your organization is safeguarded, and you're not having to relearn all of the things you've already done. And use this as an opportunity to leverage resources from your technical assistance and funding. If you're finding that you have an area that you are struggling with, it is appropriate to reach out to CalCAPA, to your state office, to say, we are looking for training with X. We need resources with financial oversight, with HR, with whatever that may be. Because all of us are really here, both the association, your state office, the national partners, all of us are here to support you in your work. And for us to be effective, we need to know what you need. So if you're having those struggles, make sure you reach out to us. Here's the slide I was thinking of earlier, and thank you, James, for putting in the chat the sessions that we're going to have. As I said, this is just 101. This is high level. But tomorrow, we're going to talk about the board's role in organizational standards, and we're going to deep dive standards that involve the board and help you talk to your board about their engagement with the standards. That session we hope to be very interactive, so come prepared to talk and to share your best practices for engaging your board in the practices that are in the org standards. On 7.7, we want to talk about navigating some of the difficult standards. So there are standards that folks generally do just fine with. And there are some that we know trip people up, like 4.3 in particular off the top of my head, which is your standard about documenting the involvement of aroma professional in your processes. So we want to talk about some of the ways that you can navigate those standards based on peer practices and best practices that we've learned. On 7.12, we want to talk about how you can implement the organizational standards and just some steps you can take to move them into action. And then on 7.28, we want to talk about going beyond, right? Compliance is one frame, and you have to have compliance in order to receive funding, in order to be a functioning organization. But there's a realm beyond that, right? Once you've met the standards, do you just want to be a compliant organization, or do you want to be an excellent organization? And so we're going to talk about how you can move into that excellence space. And then I believe Cal Kappa is going to do a great session for you on comprehensive community strengths and needs assessment. I'm so happy to see you guys framed it as strengths and needs assessment, not just needs. So I'm going to quickly run through some tools to help you assess the standards. These are the national tools. And so we have, the first thing that we have are, first we have separate tools for states and for community action agencies. So that's one thing to know when you go onto our website. We do also have separate tools for private community action agencies and public community action agencies. So guys, when you're on the site, make sure that you are looking at the proper tools for the proper entity that you are. Each of these tools that we have will provide you the COE developed standards language, and will provide you some guidance. And that COE, the Center of Excellence guidance, is reflective of the input, again, of the CSBG working group. And you know what we have seen as best practice for documenting and assuring compliance with the standards. So we have this assessment template that both states and community action agencies can use. Honestly, this was meant for states, but I used it at my agency. You know, that I would go through and you can mark off essentially, here's the standard. Am I meeting the standard? Am I not meeting the standard? I'm documenting where that standard documentation lives and any notes I may have for myself, like maybe somebody who's in charge of it or somebody I need to follow up with or some kind of nuance about the documentation itself. Guys, as you're going through this, you're probably going to find some words that you go, I don't know what that means. We have a glossary of terms for you to help define what all of these things are. The other thing is that when you look at the standards, you're going to see, okay, some of them say I have to do this every year. Some of them say I have to do it every 3 years. Some are every 5 years. Oh my goodness, like it's hard to keep track of. So we have this calendar of required actions that helps break out the standards by those that are required annually, those that are required every 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. So this is a great tool to help you kind of bring order to some of that madness. Remember when I said 4.3 off the top of my head is one of the more difficult standards, because it was a standard that we got a lot of questions about. We actually created a template that you can use to document your use of a certified Roma trainer or implementer in your processes. So this is one way to help you meet standard 4.3, and we'll talk more about that in the future. Also, there are a number of standards that your board is required to do. And so we have a calendar specific for boards to help you keep track of all of those differing timelines for those requirements. We also have created some technical assistance guides about each of the categories. So what's great about these guides is it doesn't even just tell you what the standard says and some options for documentation. We also talk about going beyond compliance and kind of how you can take your practices to the next level and try to give you some resources to support you in that work. So these technical assistance guides are great. On our website, you can find all of this information about the organizational standards. If you go to programs and initiatives and then click, there's a section for organizational standards, and it'll take you right to this really fancy page, and it has all kinds of good stuff, all the stuff I just talked about, all of those assessment guides and tools there. Also, another tool that we have, I don't know if you all are familiar with Community Action Academy. It is the National Partnerships Learning Management System. And through that, we offer all kinds of free courses for community action on all kinds of topics. But we have a great e-course on the organizational standards themselves. It's kind of an overview, talks you through some of these concepts, talks you through some of the standards, along with tools and resources to support you in assessing standards. We do also have a number of webinars on our website that you can check out. We've done a lot of webinars on these topics, deep diving different standards, showcasing peer practices. So do check out our webinars. So I want to pause before I wrap and see if this has brought up any questions for folks or anything that someone wants to share about their experience with the standards or some of the tools that we've shared. I haven't seen any questions in the chat, and I don't know if that's because I've done a good job or or if everyone's gone to sleep. How about this? While folks are maybe putting a question or two in the chat, to go ahead and put your questions in. And while you're doing that, I do just want to lift up a couple of quick things and opportunities for you as well. One of the standards talks about the need for your agency to conduct an annual or an in-depth risk assessment. And if you are familiar with the Nonprofit Risk Management Center, we have a great relationship at the partnership with the Nonprofit Risk Management Center. We are able to offer to all community action agencies a customized, free, in-depth risk assessment on the risk assessment portal. If you've never checked that out, that is available on our website. Again, I don't know if you heard me. It is free to use. It is a great comprehensive tool. One of the other super cool things through this partnership that we have with the Nonprofit Risk Management Center is we are able to offer everybody in the Community Action Network the opportunity to attend the Risk Summit. This is a 3-day training conference where the Nonprofit Risk Management Center is deep diving some of these topics related to risk. And if you're sitting here and going like, risk assessment doesn't sound like my gig, doesn't sound like my jam, it doesn't excite me, let me tell you, this is one of the best conferences. And did I say, again, I don't know if I said it clear enough, it's free. It is free for you to attend. So the next session is on July 20th, where they're going to talk about risk management fundamentals. You can register just by going to risksummit.org, 2022 risksummit.org, and you just select that you're part of the Community Action Network and your registration will be comped. So I'm really excited to share that with you. We also will be in New York City for our annual convention, August 31st through September 2nd. We will talk about org standards and all kinds of other great things at that conference. Our agenda will be posted very soon, and we're looking forward to seeing you there. I don't see any questions that have come in. So David or Lawrence, whoever wants to take it from here, if you guys have any questions or last thoughts as we wrap and pass the baton to our friends at CSD.
Thanks, Mary. I appreciate it. I'm going to turn it over to Lawrence in just a second. I don't see any questions. I think that was wonderful. I really appreciate all that. I do see that James Scott has dropped in there all the follow-ups. So now is the time to make sure that you have each of the individual follow-ups, or to think about what staff member you would like to attend each one of those follow-up meetings. I think that would be, or they will be really, really great. We try to spread them out the best we can. We'll finish with August 17th, which kind of moves into more of the comprehensive community strengths and needs assessment. That's one I'll be leading, and one in which we will try to help expand the idea of the comprehensive of the needs assessment, try to move to a deeper dive into data development, such as those, so forth. So I don't want to continue. I do want to thank a couple people really quick. I did see Leslie Taylor on, and I appreciate she coming in. We did speak earlier today, and she had a couple conflicting meetings, so I do appreciate her spending time to come on and support this. And again, we really, really appreciate the partnership and all that they do in putting this together and having a vast knowledge of the understanding. But as Mary Beth said, please feel free to reach out to us or them or any way we can help as these start to roll out and as we start to talk more in depth about each one of these. If you have a question about it, there's more than likely somebody else does as well. Next, I do want to introduce our leader in the training and technical assistance, Cal Kappa, and give him the opportunity to say hello. I appreciate. He's done a wonderful job to keep us all on task and to make sure that the partnership in our office and the CSD office as well all stay in line to be able to deliver this to you. So without further ado, Lawrence, you want to take it away and say hi and introduce Wilmer and his team.
Yeah, thanks, David. Yeah, I'm very excited for the series, and I'm very happy that CSD is able to stay with us here for a few more minutes to share some tools that they have. So please don't leave just yet. There's a couple of good minutes of information coming your way. So I am happy to introduce Wilmer Brown, who's with us from CSD. Many of you know Wilmer, and he is going to introduce some of the tools that CSD has available as you go through this organizational standards journey, and in support of not just meeting those standards, but exceeding them, as Maribeth has pointed out over and over again. You know, the standards just get you to the baseline, and then it's up to us to exceed those and excel. So Wilmer, you out there?
Sure am.
All right, sir, I will hand things over to you.
Okay, can you see my screen yet?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, thanks, Mary Beth. Really enjoyed that summation and Org Standards 101. What I have to present follows right along with that, so great. Okay, folks, it is California Network. It is Org Standards time again. And everyone, I know you're so excited about that and just ready to go. Today, I just want to talk about a few things. Again, our foundational goal, which has really been talked about. I want to talk about returning to our pre-COVID process, because the process has been different for 2020 as well as 2021. A little bit about completing your assessment, some tools. I'm just going to give you a little tease as far as the top 5 unmet standards, just so that you'll know you'll be watching out for those. One of those was already mentioned. And then some housekeeping, some scheduled deadlines that you will definitely hear from your field representatives. So with that, again, the org standards are part of the CSBG performance management framework. And again, it helps to make sure that we are maintaining a basic level of management and operational standards. As I tend to tell, as I discuss them, I think a lot of these are really common sense, and you do some of these perhaps without even noticing them before they were implemented in 2015 and 2016. The state office has the ultimate authority and responsibility for the interpretation and documentation of the org standards, and we hope to make that really simple for you folks. And I think we got a scheme that you will enjoy. And then also, CSD has not set a standard performance goal for 2022, and we never have. We're just hoping that everyone meets 100% of the organizational standards. So with that, let's go a little further. Okay, so during 2020 and 2021, what CSD did is we took the scores from 2019, we moved it, we transferred it into 2020. We thought it was a little burdensome, and based upon the grace that was given under IM 154, administrative reliefs, what CSD did is, instead of having you do a full-blown organizational standard, we had you certify your previous year standard. And then also there was a certification that many of you signed, that you would then work on any technical assistance plans that were still outstanding. And so we did that for 2020 standards, also for 2021. But now we're moving into 2022, and so we're back to our full assessment of the org standards using the tool. And again, these standards, they're the same standards. I know a number of you are new to the network, and hearing about these organizational standards, they may seem intimidating, 58 for private, 50 for public, but actually they're not. And I think if you have the time to start going through them, you'll see that they pretty much make pretty common sense. There are some that are a little difficult, but by and large, all our agencies should be prepared to meet those. So completing your 2022 standards. For California, we have a tool, statewide tool that we use to collect your org standards information. It's a familiar tool. It's the same tool that you use to report your annual report information that you use for your CARES and your disaster and your regular CSBG. It includes an organizational standards module. And then some of you, I think you have purchased CSG Engage. So it's all a part of that software suite. And so that's the tool that we have been using, I believe, since 2015, 2016. It's an online system that allows for a fairly easy submission and uploading of documentation. Some of you, because a lot of you are new, you may need to update the users because, again, we haven't done an assessment, real assessment since 2019. So if you need to update your users, please contact your assigned field representative, and they will send you, or they will make sure you have the agency form. I'm not sure if this form is still on the local area, local agency portal. I'm not sure of that, but please contact your field rep, and they will help you to fill out the form. You'll return it to your field rep, and then CSD then performs that coordination between the vendor and you to make sure that you get your new folks signed up. As we do every year, org standards opening on June 1st. So the org standard is open, and you can.
Organizational standards met by contract deliverables. CSD has identified this list of standards that are automatic.
Wow. This is my presentation, and apparently I left that on there. So without that audio, what we have is what we've tried to do at CSD is we tried to make sure we've looked at the org standards and we looked at various deliverables. We looked at, for instance, your community action plan, your annual report, your board roster, and your annual audit. And based upon the acceptance of your community action plan, your annual report, and these other documents, we deem these standards met. So for these standards, as you're filling out your form, if you're doing your form, all you have to do is met by community action plan. We were trying to work with the vendor to find a way to kind of have these automatically met, but we weren't able to do that. So all you'll have to do for these standards in the comment box is met by community action plan. And again, we have a few more tools that'll help you to do that. So these standards
met by contract deliverables.
Sorry.
CSD has identified.
Okay.
Documenting compliance.
Go back. I borrowed the slides, but didn't take off the audio. Anyway, so these slides here are, these standards are met by documentation presented in your board meeting minutes. I cannot stress the importance of the board meeting minutes and your documentation in the board meeting minutes. If you have documented that you have completed an activity, we will accept your board meeting minutes as proof that you have done that. Now, some agencies, because they've done this for a number of years now, have actually in their board meeting minutes, they will, like for instance, when they present programmatics, they'll say, they'll present their programmatics information, and they'll say to satisfy org standard 5.9 or whatever it is. So many agencies have done that, and it's actually a good technique. Not only that, if you notice in your community action plan that is coming up again pretty soon, and you just did it. In your community action plan, if you look at the questions in there, if you remember them, they always spoke to or reference a particular org standard. So as you answered it there, you were basically filling out the community action plan and that assessment, but then also you were addressing your org standards responses at that time. So for 2019, and again, I didn't look at 2020 or 2021 because they were basically copies. These are the, for private agencies, we had 6. These were the most missed organizational standards for private agencies. Comprehensive risk assessment, not having a quorum, personnel policies that have been reviewed, not reviewed by an attorney, the governing board, performance appraisal of the ED. And so these were the top ones that were missed by private agencies. Let's see, I had a public one. Let me find the public one. There was a public. Okay, these were, yeah, okay, these were the top ones that were missed by the public agencies. These are private. These are public. We'll make sure that, again, this is recorded, so you'll have this information. When we were talking to agencies and so on, and some of the reasons why standards are missed is that not providing adequate documentation. Now, again, we work with agencies back and forth to make sure that you have the documentation. But what we tend to find is actually the second one is the greatest culprit. It's just that CAs don't anticipate the lead time necessary to meet certain standards. Because as Mary Beth mentioned, some standards are required for you to meet every single year, a document and report on every year. Some are 3 years, some are 5 years. And sometimes if we're not careful, what happens is that you kind of miss that 3-year window, you miss that 5-year window, and it's a standard that takes 3 or 4 months to accomplish. And here it is in October, and so you don't have enough time to complete it. So we just ask that you are vigilant and keep watch on those standards. But then I'm very proud to then say that in your eGov tool, in the eGov tool, there is an area called state guidance. And these are all of the documents that we have there for you. We have IM 138, we have a submitter's guide to help you to know how to submit the standards. It provides screenshots and takes you step by step. What we've done is CSD has developed 2 supplemental guides, one for public agencies, one for private. And in the supplemental guides, instead of leaving up the guesswork as to what document will, or a series of documents that will meet a standard, we specifically say, for this standard, submit this. This is what we prefer. And we've done that for all of the standards that have not been met by either your community action plan or your board minutes. So we really lay that out for you so that it's really simple as to what we want. And so we take the guesswork out, and so that your staff isn't uploading 7 documents to try to somehow meet the mark. And we're just saying, nope, just send this, and this will meet the standard. Also, there is a technical assistant plan development guide, which is there, and we call it quick tips for TAPS. If you have a technical assistance plan, the system will lead you through how to develop that. But this is a guide to help you do that. A calendar of required board actions, again, and we'll need to upload. I see there's 3 documents we'll need to upload. We'll need to upload the overall calendar. We'll upload 4.3, and then we'll upload the glossary of terms. We'll go ahead and do that. Also, which I found, a tool that I found very, very helpful was the technical assistance guides. We have technical assistance guide 1 all the way through 9. It's there, available for your use. So please take advantage of that. And then your other great resource is your field representative. Just to tidy it up here and give you a timeline. Again, the org standard tool is open and available for you to start completing your assessments and uploading your documents. Organizational standards, your completed assessment is due to CSD by August 31st. During the month of September, that's when the field staff is really reviewing. If you submitted early, field staff at that point will probably, if they will start reviewing it early also. But usually we allow September, the month of September, for field staff to really look at your assessment, to look and make sure that if you have any technical assistance plans, that they're clear, that you have the dates in there. And if not, then they will send you requests for modifications for those. And you will start receiving those by the end of September. Therefore, from the time that you receive back your assessment, from basically October through January 31st, that's the time for your agency to work on or resolve any technical assistance plans or anything like that. So we give you about 4 months in there to get those done. And then on January 31st, at February 1 at 12:01, Org Standards is closed, and that's your assessment score for that particular year.